Welcome back to One Woman Circus. My name is Christina, and today is episode 2 of our segment Mystery, Crime, and Crochet. Today I will be doing a pattern Done by Donielle, and this is the Jack Skellington pattern. And our story today is going to be the Delimar Vera story. So, this story begins on the night of December 15th in 1997. Parents of Delimar are Luz Cuevas and Pedro Vera, and at this night, they were at home winding down from a Christmas party that they had just hosted. And Pedro's distant cousin, Carolyn, who had earlier attended the party, her name is Carolyn Correa, and she had actually come back to the house because she said she had forgotten her purse. While she was there, she also asked Pedro to look at her brakes on her car because she felt that they weren't working properly. And so, after looking at them, he said that they did need a couple things like to be fixed on them. So, she ended up staying for a little bit while he was working on her car. As they were doing that, or as he was working on the car, Luz and Carolyn started talking while she was, cleaning up the house and stuff from the party. So they were talking for a little bit, and then after a while, Carolyn ended up going upstairs to get her purse because she was ready to leave. And when she came back down, she had left in her car. And shortly after Carolyn had left, a fire had ended up breaking out in the home. Uh, Obviously, it's a two-story home, just to note, and the fire had broken out on the second story. So Luz hadn't noticed right away when it happened until the smoke started coming downstairs. And obviously, she, was concerned because there's smoke in her house. So she went upstairs and realized there was a fire, so she went to get her three kids who were in the home. She had two sons who were a little bit older, not older, but elementary school age. And then she also had a 10-day-old baby girl, and her name was Delimar. And she went to get her two boys, which she was able to do no problem. But when she went to go get Delimar in her room, she noticed that the crib was empty. And then she also noticed that the window in the bedroom had been open. She saw that, and she, in crazy times, I don't care who you are, you're gonna do, not crazy things, but you're gonna be frantic or thinking of every possibility. So she went around the upstairs and was looking for her in other places, and she actually came back into the room a couple other times, and still she could not find her. And she ended up actually having to leave because the fire was so bad that it was burning her. She actually sustained burns to her face and her neck. And so she was getting so hot and stuff like that that she ended up having to leave. And so um, she left thinking, oh my God, I left my baby in the house, or, you know, frantic, obviously. The fire had lasted about 15 minutes before firefighters were able to get it out. And the official ruling for the cause of the fire was that it was started by an overheated extension cord from a space heater. Since Delamar's actual body was never found, they claimed her as being deceased and that it was a closed case. So, I mean, there was never anything saying, you know, oh, the mom saw this, or that that her body was never actually found. So they had tested fibers that were in the fire, thinking that, oh, these fibers were her remains. And so ultimately it came out that that's not what it actually was, but at the time that's what they thought. So after all this, Luz never actually thought that Delamar was gone. She always insisted that the crib was empty when she went to get her, and that someone, might have taken her. That was always her thought, just because what else could there be? Because of this and the fact that they didn't have a body, Luz never felt comfortable with holding a funeral or pursuing a death certificate for her, so she never did. Um, because she didn't have a body, it for her not having a for them not having a body, and then for everything that she saw that night, it led her to be skeptical about everything, rightly so because of what she saw and what she thought. So the stress of what was thought to be the death of the baby, as far as the dad thinking that Pedro, and then Luz thinking something else had happened and had always, was talking about it, it actually ended up causing a wedge between them. And her and Pedro ended up divorcing because of this, which is really sad just because of the way things ended and stuff like that, or how the story ended up turning out. It's terrible. But if you fast forward to January 24th of 2004, Luz was attending a birthday party for a child of a friend. And while at the party, she kept noticing a little girl who she thought looked a lot like herself. As she was running around and stuff, she also noticed, like, hey, this little girl kind of looks like my two sons, too. And specifically, she was looking at a dimple that the little girl had when she would smile. She thought the dimple was just a dead ringer for her boys and the same dimple they had when they smiled. After a little while, she ended up asking her friend who that little girl had belonged to, and they said, "Oh, that's Aaliyah, and she's Carolyn Correa's child." Uh, After hearing Carolyn's name, she thought it was too much of a coincidence, so eventually she got the little girl to come over to her. And as someone who watched crime shows, Luz knew she had to get a piece of her hair, so she had claimed to the little girl that she had gum in her hair, and she was like, come over here and I'll help you get it out. So she was pretending to get it out of her hair, and she actually plucked a couple hairs, and that's how she ended up getting a sample. After that, Luz went to the police with all the information, including the hair that she had gotten from the child, and she was wanting to get it tested for DNA to see if it matched her own. And unfortunately, the police didn't take her concern seriously. And when they went to ask Carolyn for her daughter's birth certificate, she was actually able to provide them with one, which said the child's information as well as the fact that her birth was a home birth. And so, everything looked completely fine to the police, like nothing was wrong, there was nothing suspicious, and so they basically dropped it no matter, the concerns that Luz was having or claiming or anything like that. And it's really unfortunate that, they didn't take her seriously. And because she wasn't getting any more help from them, Luz decided to take her pleas to a state politician. It took her a little bit to actually get, his attention, but once she did, he did sit down with her and, listen to her story. And at first, he was a little bit skeptical, but after a while, he started to believe what she was saying and was able to push for the DNA test to get done. So, thank God for that. Oh my gosh, can you imagine if that never happened? While the test was getting done, Aaliyah was taken into state custody until the results came back. And when they did, it was ruled that Aaliyah's DNA matched Luz Cueva's DNA, meaning that Aaliyah was in fact Delimar all along. So let's go back to December of 1997. 3 days before the fire broke out, Carolyn had been pregnant and did give birth to a baby. Um, She had always had issues with childbearing, and she had a number of, I believe it was two births that ended up in the death of the baby, unfortunately. And then she also had multiple miscarriages. And so the 3 days before the fire, Carolyn had been pregnant and did give birth to a baby, but it was stillborn. Um, it's thought that this caused her to have a mental break after this happened, and that's what led her to kidnap Delamar. Um, but she ended up kidnapping her and she brought her home as if she were her own and named her Aaliyah. Her boyfriend at the time, whose name was Andre Moore, he never thought to question anything until she was about until Aaliyah was about excuse me 3 years old, and he ended up asking for a paternity test. And so, they did the test and everything, which obviously it came out negative, and he ended up leaving her. So when police went to get Carolyn after they figured out that the DNA matched and that Aaliyah was not hers and it was in fact Luz's daughter, Delimar, she ended up fleeing, and she would leave behind her three other kids and just completely left them and ran away. A few days later, though, she did end up surrendering herself to authorities and she was taken in to custody. And Carolyn Correa was sentenced to 30 years in prison for kidnapping, arson, and concealing the whereabouts of a missing child. It's really hard to believe that somebody would do this, let alone, someone's family. Um, the whole reason that Delimar was, or excuse me, Carolyn was even there was at the Christmas party that day was because she was actually a distant cousin of Pedro, who was Delimar's um, father. And so, technically they were related. And there's actually some thought, I don't want to say conspiracy. That's the word I want to use, but it's not conspiracy, but there's just skepticism around some of the things that happened that night. Like the fact that the window was open. So if Delimar had, or excuse me, not Delimar, if Carolyn had left, how did that leave room for her to climb up and then take the baby? And then also something that is kind of out there is people think that Pedro, which is Delamar's father, was involved and that him and Carolyn possibly had a secret relationship and they were hoping to take the baby and then have a family of their own. That's also another thing that's out there that's, was brought up as a possibility, but unfortunately with no proof or anything like that, or to have proof of a second person helping, which was highly suggested, there was nothing they could do, which was why Carolyn was the only one who was actually convicted. And so, yeah, that's just super unfortunate. At the time that she was given back to her mother, Delimar was 6 years old, and that's basically 6 years she's never going to get back because she was 10 days old when she was taken. But they have a great relationship now and live happily ever after. But yeah, so that's Delimar Vera's story, and it's just insane. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you have thoughts on the case or anything like that, comment below and let me know what you think. And I will see you guys next week. Have a great week. Bye.